Well, happy Thursday. Today is November 9th, 2023. My name is Ward Keever, founder and CEO of Covenant Wealth Strategies. I'm joined by Michelle Fisher here in my office today, and we are delighted to bring Social Security strategies, unlocking the potential of Social Security. Social Security is a very, very important part of retirement readiness. And we're delighted to have Ralph Ricchetti, Jr. With us today. I'll introduce him further in just a moment, and then our speaker, Mike Lynch, both from Hartford Funds. So here at Covenant, we do comprehensive fee-based financial planning and wealth management, and so part of that is retirement readiness, and part of that is Social Security claiming strategies. And a lot of people don't give much thought to Social Security, but we have clients pulling down well north of $50,000 a year, or with spouses could be $75,000, $80,000 a year or more from Social Security. So this is a pretty big deal. It's a pretty significant resource. It's a pretty large opportunity, and there are a lot of questions that should be asked and a lot of decisions that need to be made. Many of those are irrevocable decisions. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time today getting educated on Social Security and how to unlock the potential and maximize the value and benefits of Social Security. So we've had a couple of minutes to spend with Ralph and Mike. And so Ralph lives in Ridley Park, Pennsylvania, which is where my cousin grew up, and I spent a fair amount of time there hanging out. He has two boys, John and Rocco, and we also learned that they enjoy Ocean City, New Jersey, which I'm fourth generation, and it sounds like, Ralph, you're at least second, maybe third, so your boys are third or fourth generation in Ocean City? And so certainly very special.
My boys would be third, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. So Ralph joined Hartford Funds in 2004, and is our relationship manager here at Covenant Wealth Strategies, and is a advisor consultant for Hartford Funds and also the Hartford 529 College Savings Plan. Has a bachelor's degree in economics from Dickinson College, and basically grew up around about, what we say, Collingsdale, not Collingswood, but Collingsdale.
Grew up in Collingsdale, just born and raised in Delaware County, as we like to call it, Delco.
Delco.
There you go.
Yep.
There
Good
you go.
stuff. And intro on Mike Lynch, our speaker. He and his wife Kim live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they have two adult children who are thankfully out of college, Josh and Emily, who both live close by, and that's a blessing. Mike just celebrated in September 30 years with the Hartford organization, so great job there. Congratulations. In his current role, Mike is responsible for engaging and educating both financial advisors and our clients about current and emerging opportunities in financial planning, including things such as retirement income planning, which of course is where Social Security fits in, as well as charitable planning strategies and long-term care and aging strategies. So Mike joined in 1993 as an annuity client service specialist and has moved around the organization, but in 2006 he became vice president and national director of Hartford's Wealth and Retirement Consulting Group, which provides thought leadership and financial education focused on retirement planning. So Mike has been quoted in prestigious publications such as Barron's, U.S. News and World Report, and several others. He earned his bachelor's degree in business administration from Eastern Connecticut State University. And we also have a few things that are not on his bio. So Mike is also the oldest freshman currently enrolled at Wake Forest Law School. Congratulations and shout out on that.
Thanks.
Owns loves classic cars, and I loved what you said a moment ago when you were telling us about your wife said you were a pioneer in the driverless car technology because your, was it a Triumph, basically wouldn't start and didn't run, and so that was effectively a driverless car as far as she was concerned. So, good stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ralph, who will share a little bit and then further introduce Mike, and we'll dig into our presentation. Ralph, take it away.
Fantastic, Ward. Thank you very much. Just wanted to quickly say thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you to all of our veterans out there who served our country. I know we're coming up on Veterans Day, so just really wanted to say thank you and appreciate your service. Thank you to Ward and Michelle for giving us the opportunity to speak to all of you tonight. And we're just really privileged to have our guest speaker, Mike Lynch, with us. Mike and I have known each other for a long time. We go back a number of years. Mike's a great partner and a great speaker and very knowledgeable on this topic of Social Security. Mike even helps us at Hartford Funds write some of the content for some of our pieces for the Social Security concept. So this is a very important topic, especially for your retirement planning. I was down in Millsboro, Delaware, a couple weeks ago, giving the same presentation for clients. We had great participation, a lot of questions. There's a lot to uncover, and I believe there's going to be some changes in 2024 ahead as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mike. Mike, again, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, Ralph, thanks very much. Ward and Michelle, thank you for the time and putting this together. We know it takes quite a yeoman's effort to put these calls together, so we appreciate the opportunity. Folks, more importantly, thank you for taking some time out of your day. I certainly know time is one of the most precious commodities, so I appreciate you carving off a little bit of your time today to hopefully learn a little bit more about Social Security. When I say the word Social Security, if you kind of scratch your head or have some concern, fear not, you're in good company, because I think Social Security is a terrific topic, but I think there's as much information as misinformation about Social Security. It certainly is great because there's some flexibility, but I think some of the confusion is in that flexibility. So our goal tonight is to kind of give you more of a high level and hopefully help you begin the conversation about Social Security. It's rare that someone hangs up, or when we do face-to-face events, walks away and says, okay, I know exactly what I need to do, but rather hopefully give you some information, arm you, so to speak, with some questions that you can kind of sit down and discuss with maybe yourself, with your spouse, and then more importantly, come back to Ward and Michelle and kind of come up with what's the best option available. So as we go through the presentation, if you have any questions at all, you can email Michelle at covenantwealthstrategies.com. I'll bring the email up at the end as well. But if you have any questions, certainly during the presentation, feel free to type those questions to Michelle, and we'll do our best to get those answered. I think anytime you talk about Social Security, it's almost as if you brought the elephant in the room, if you will. I kind of brought up the touchy subject. Usually any event I do, someone usually raises their hand and says, what do we think about the future of Social Security? Yeah, Mike, but will Social Security be here? Now, unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. I certainly wish I did. It would be very helpful over the years. Our thought at Hartford Funds is we don't think Social Security is going to go away altogether. We think it's too important a social program. It's 80 plus years of age at this point. So Social Security was first enacted in 1935. It was part of the New Deal with FDR. And think about back then, sweeping changes, an amazing, the New Deal was just an amazing program for the country. So many different, pieces and so much different legislation, but really benefited a number of people. What's important primarily back then is the average life expectancy. In the mid-30s, the average life expectancy for a male was only 59 years of age. However, you didn't collect your first benefit payment from Social Security back then until 65. Now, for everybody, you kind of do the math there and say, wait a second, majority of people, unfortunately, didn't even collect their benefit. That's one of the bigger challenges of Social Security, is it really hasn't kept up with life expectancy. So we don't think it's going to go away altogether. Looking at the debate last night and some of the other prior debates, I think we're hard pressed to say an elected leader is going to stand up at a podium and say, on my watch, Social Security ended. But we certainly don't think it's going to stay exactly the same as it is today. So we're kind of in that change camp. We're certainly hopeful. We don't think it's going to go away. But what it looks like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it may be dramatically different. We just don't know what those changes look like. Are they drips and drabs? We see sweeping reform. So at some point, we do need our elected leaders to hopefully get together, and I'm sure they will, to make some changes to account for some of this older life expectancy. It's interesting. There's this section called the History of Social Security. And they have a couple of individuals in particular. You may have heard the woman before, Ida Mae Fuller. A lot of folks reference her. They claim she was the very first recipient of Social Security. Now, based on her age and the timing of Social Security, she only paid in 2 years, $24.75. She then went on to reach age 100 and collected $22,000 plus. But again, she was really the rare exception. Ernest Ackerman wasn't in as good a position, unfortunately. The very first year that they rolled out Social Security, they offered a lump sum payment. So once you retired, you could take your Social Security in a lump sum. Thankfully, they only offered it the first year. They've stopped doing that. And this gentleman, I'm not sure why, but he took his 17 cents and kind of went on his way. But, it's certainly thinking about this program. It hasn't, again, as I mentioned, really keep up with life expectancy, or hasn't done a good enough job keeping up with life expectancy. How many of us know someone in their 80s, 90s, if not hundreds, relatively healthy and active? So I think when we think about Social Security, it's really important to remind ourselves that from day one, from the 30s till today, Social Security was never designed to be the sole source of income in retirement, but rather a source. Now, I know some folks certainly rely on a great percentage of their income in retirement from Social Security, but I do think we need to kind of think about this three-legged stool and really think about, are we doing everything we can to have a successful retirement? People in prior generations, and I think of my dad, unfortunately, who's passed, but I remember my dad entered retirement and he was really happy at that time. I used to joke he whistled all the time. And I'm thinking, what in the world do you have to whistle about? I think he was whistling, quite honestly, because he was making more money in retirement than he ever did working. He had a strong Social Security payment. He had a pension, which is a foreign term nowadays, unfortunately, and he had personal savings. Honestly, I don't think he saved as much as he should have, but he had a strong pension. He had Social Security. Now, many of us, unfortunately, are no longer have the option of taking a pension or being available to a pension. Really, it's kind of a foreign term nowadays. So Social Security hopefully will continue to be there. That leg may be a little wobbly and may change, but really the one that you can shore up, the one you fully control, is that third leg, that savings and investments. That's your personal savings. Thinking about your 401k, your retirement plan, IRAs, Roth IRAs. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can to have a successful retirement. Again, I think for our generations, things were a little different. Our generation and future generations, we're going to change everything. We have up until this point, we're going to change the face of retirement. Unfortunately, it may not be for the better because we may have to do more to save for our own retirement, but it's important to be knowledgeable, to think about Social Security, really kind of go through the pros and cons. But really, at the end of the day, the one leg you fully control is that savings and investment leg. So with that, as I mentioned tonight, kind of thinking about certain topics and really doing this presentation for probably the past 20 years, I find most folks have 3 or 4 questions in common. When should I take my benefit? That generally is probably the first question and kind of the overriding theme. Unfortunately, there's no right or wrong. It really depends on us as individuals. So we'll go through just some options and make sure you're aware of, from a timing perspective, what happens. The role of work, it's continuing to evolve. I'm meeting more and more people lately, and I've traveled quite a bit in my job, that are saying, I have no thought of retiring anymore. Maybe years ago it was for somebody else, but I want to continue to work as long as possible. So we need to be aware of the fact that if we do file and continue to work, there's a very small amount we're entitled to earn. If we get above that amount, unfortunately, our benefit may be reduced. Everybody's favorite on a Thursday afternoon, right? Taxation. It's probably the briefest part of the presentation because sadly, there's really not much good news. We're probably going to pay taxes in our portion of our Social Security, but we'll go through it and hopefully give you some ideas. And then more importantly, from an awareness perspective, what are you actually entitled to at the end of the day? So as I mentioned, from a timing perspective, if we paid in Social Security or married someone who's paid in Social Security and qualifies, we're entitled to take that benefit as early as age 62. Now, generally taking it as 62 means it's the lowest payment that's available to us. Generally speaking, you probably take a haircut of about 25 cents. So you'll probably get about 75 cents on the dollar for your benefit. Now, we can wait till 63. Our benefit may be a little bit higher, 64, 65. That's kind of that early range. And a good rule of thumb is the longer we wait, generally the greater the benefit is. Now, you see that green section, FRA, full retirement age. That I used to start at 65. all of us on the call, our full retirement age used to be 65. Well, as I mentioned, some of the changes they have put in place, and we'll continue to see some changes, I think. One of those was to gradually push up full retirement age from the age of 65 to now 67. And you see that middle section, they kind of grandfathered people in. It wasn't just an overnight, everybody's now 67, but they grandfathered certain ages. So, for example, if you were born in 1956, your new full retirement age is 66 and 4 months. If you were born in 58, 66 and 8 months. I was born in 1964. So my full retirement age now is 67. Why that's important is generally that's the max benefit. So waiting until full retirement age, that generally is your maximum benefit. Although you do see that blue section there, that delay section, there actually is a bonus or to some extent an enhanced feature if you choose to maybe continue to work or you don't necessarily need your Social Security benefit. You can delay your benefit from full retirement age to the age of 70. And in fact, every year you choose to delay it, your benefit is increased by 8%. So say, for example, I'm working at Hartford Funds, 68 years of age, continuing to work, continue to enjoy it. Don't necessarily need my Social Security. Maybe I don't even want my Social Security payment. I can defer it, I can delay it. And behind the scenes, it's getting increased by 8%. 8% is not a bad return by the U.S. government, right? So again, that goes up until the age of 70. Doesn't mean you have to take your Social Security at the age 70. In fact, you never have to take your Social Security payment. I haven't met too many people who haven't. I'm sure Social Security would love you if you didn't, right? But generally speaking, your delay, that increase, stops at the age of 70. So again, it's something to think about. And you may be kind of, sitting back thinking, well, gosh, why wouldn't I just wait till 70? What's the downside? Well, what if, God forbid, something happens at 69 or 69 in 10 months or something? I'm so excited, can't wait to start taking my benefit at age 70. And then unfortunately I pass away. Well, I gave up those benefits from say 62 or 65 until that time frame. So I've missed out on all that income. Now the upside might be if, for example, my wife Kim, if her benefit's much lower than mine, by waiting, she may get a larger benefit for the rest of her life and a death benefit, which we'll talk about towards the end. So if you look at it more of a numerical standpoint, as I mentioned, I guess it's more like 70 cents on the dollar and 30 cents you give up. At age 62, it's $700. You see that gradually increase until full retirement age. In this example, full retirement age is $67,000. And then you see in that blue section. So I think there's an opportunity to really sit down and think about what works best for me, what works best for my spouse, really what's the best option. One of the things we've had some great success with is kind of changing some of the wording. Instead of thinking about it from a when perspective, ask yourself the question, what? What income do I need from Social Security? Maybe even more importantly, take a step back and say, what income do I need or do I think I'm going to need from a monthly basis? What total income am I going to look and need? Think about those sources of income as I talked about earlier. Where are those going to fill in? What's the gap? What do I need from Social Security? So if you think about it from a what perspective and kind of go through the process and you say, gosh, if I get $700 a month, I'd be in great shape. Well, the good news is you can file as early as age 62 and you'll get that $700. If you say maybe I need a little bit more, closer to 1,000, we may have to wait a little bit till maybe full retirement age. If you say, well, I really am counting on more from Social Security, we may have to come up with a plan B, or we may have to wait until age 70 or somewhere closer to that. So I think really the opportunity to kind of take a step back, first of all, kind of think about and envision, are you going to retire? If you are, what income do you think you need on a monthly basis? And then how much is going to come from Social Security? I think if you can kind of determine the what, the when almost fills in itself. Now, a couple things to think about this. One, if you're not sure what your full retirement age is, I would encourage you to go out at SSA.gov, Social Security Administration's website. So SSA.gov, it's a terrific website. If there's any negative at all, it's as if they put too much information out there. So I would encourage you, if you go out to the website, take advantage of the search bar. I literally have typed in questions in the search bar and gotten the responses I was looking for. So once you go out there, set up an account. Once you have the account open, you can run a quick calculation. It'll tell you your full retirement age, tell you approximately how much you're entitled to from a Social Security perspective. And then I would encourage you to just take an extra maybe 30 seconds. There's an area called sources of income. And basically what it does is tracks income that's been reported to Social Security from the time you worked until today. So I would encourage you, just go out there and make sure that information is accurate. Now, do it with a grain of salt. I went out there the other day and looked at my account, and it had income when I was 15 years of age. I think it was $1,200. I have no idea if that $1,200 is correct. But I do know for about the past 5 or 10 years, approximately how much I've earned contributed to Social Security. I think 99.9% of us, the information will be accurate. But I think it's just a great opportunity to take a quick second and take a look at that. So once you have that account established, you can go in there from time to time, take a look at that information, maybe print off a more accurate, updated statement, sit down with the ward and say, okay, here's where I'm at. Maybe my spouse, here's where my spouse is at. I think the day and age, honestly, of choosing an option just because a friend, a relative, or a neighbor chose it, I think those days have kind of gone by. We need to think about us as individuals. What makes sense for me? What makes sense for my wife? And I think that's where we really need to have more of an individual-based decision and kind of going through this process. So if you have the opportunity to think about it from a what perspective, I think it'll help. Again, the role of work, I think it's going to continue to evolve. We actually do quite a bit of work with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, and specifically an area up at MIT's in Cambridge on their campus called the Age Lab. It's a physical lab housed up at MIT's campus. And really their responsibility, what they do is they study aging. They study all aspects of aging. Could be transportation, housing, healthcare, whatever discipline. Dr. Joe Coughlin, who runs the lab, and his team are on top of it, and they're studying it. One of the areas they focused quite a bit of attention on recently was the role of work. They see this continuing to evolve. And as I mentioned earlier, what we're hearing from more and more folks is, I want to continue to work as long as possible. Now, if we want to retire, and we've certainly earned that, we have the opportunity. But Dr. Joe's a firm believer, the day and age of 65, 67, the hard and fast finish line, you get the cake and maybe the watch or something, those days are probably gone. People are probably going to want to continue to work in their 70s. Hopefully it's because we enjoy what we're doing and keeps us busy. It may not be the same role. It may be part-time. It might be a different type of role. But I think the evolution of work is going to be an important one. But it does specifically interact or kind of affect our Social Security benefit. So what you want to think about is if you file early. So I'm 62, working at Hartford Funds. I'm making a nice living. I'm going to continue to work there, but I want to file for my benefit. Well, if you earn below $21,240, that number is just specifically earned income, and it's just for me, or it will be just for my wife. So it's an individual-based number. So if you're below that number, then you're fine. Your benefit is not reduced. You'll get your full Social Security benefit. If, however, you're literally $2 above that, unfortunately, the Social Security Administration withholds $1 out of your Social Security check. Get another $2 above it, they're going to withdraw another $1. I'll show you an example in a minute. But a rule of thumb is if you're 62, 64, 65, and so on, you continue to work, you plan on working, and you're making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, your benefit is going to be dramatically reduced. And it's something you certainly want to be aware of. Now, the year you turn full retirement age, and again, as I mentioned, everybody on the call, our timing, the year that we turn full retirement age is different. But the actual year you turn full retirement age, the benefit amount is actually increased a little bit, which I think is terrific. It allows us a little bit more time, a little bit more income. But again, the same scenario. If the year I turn full retirement age and gosh, I do great the first couple months and I'm earning $60,000 a year already, bad news. If I file for my Social Security benefit, for every $3 above that amount, they draw down $1. Another $3 above that, they draw down $1. So it's something we certainly want to be aware of. Now, you see that blue section there, after full retirement age. So I'm 68 years of age, continue to work at Hartford Funds. My full retirement age is 67. I can earn $1, I can earn $10 million. It does not matter. I can file and my benefit is not reduced. So the way I always think about Social Security, they're really technically two groups. People that file early sometimes don't have as much flexibility. If you can wait until full retirement age or after, you may have more flexibility. Now, that in no way means I'm endorsing you should wait until full retirement age. Everyone's different. I don't give tax or legal advice. We just want to point out the differences. But we do need to be aware of the fact that this cap is in place. So a quick example, someone to say 62 years of age, earning $45,000 a year, 21,000 plus is their limit. They're only above the limit by about 23,000. But look more importantly in the bottom, in the parentheses, their benefit went from expecting $1,300 a month to only receiving $310 a month. That's $990 every month. That's going to be lower in your check. That's going to be lower in your benefit amount. Now, again, if you're 62, continuing to work, you're going to work for another 4 or 5 years. Every month, this check is going to be a little bit lower. So it's something you need to be prepared for. Now, I will mention the fact that it is withholding. So the good news is technically you're owed that $1,300 a month. So that $990 that they're withholding, once you reach full retirement age, they will start to pay you that money back. So again, you're owed that money. It's your money. Once you reach full retirement age, they'll start to gradually pay that back, but they pay that over your life expectancy. Life expectancy is the biggest unknown, as we kind of talked about. So what if, gosh forbid, I pass away 2 days after my 67th birthday? Again, I've missed out on all these benefit amounts. So it's something we certainly want to think about. Again, not to say it's right or wrong. We just need to be aware of the fact that this withholding is in place. I always think it's interesting wording because I always think of it as a penalty, but Social Security says it's withholding. So it probably sounds a little bit nicer, but it's something, again, we certainly want to be aware of and we certainly want to think about. As I mentioned, everybody's favorite, taxation. Probably a quick answer from a tax perspective is you probably, unfortunately, will pay taxes on our Social Security benefit. It's really just what percentage. So the way that calculation is done, and as I mentioned earlier, with benefit reduction, it's just your earned income or maybe your spouse's earned income. From a tax perspective, it's more of the modified adjusted gross income. So if it's you and your spouse, you're married filing jointly, as you probably know, that number is a little bit bigger than just maybe just your earned income. That number plus half your Social Security benefit. So if, for example, you filed and you're getting $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year, half of that or $12,000 is added back into that calculation, and that equals your provisional or your combined income. So if all you're in retirement, if all you're collecting is just Social Security benefit, you don't have any other money coming in, you're below 25,000 or 32,000 married filing jointly, then you probably won't pay taxes on your Social Security benefit. But if, however, your modified adjusted gross income, half your Social Security benefit, is between $25,000 and $34,000 or $32,000, $44,000, then unfortunately you're going to pay taxes on up to 50%. Now, it doesn't mean you're in a 50% category. It just means half of your Social Security is going to be subject to taxation at the current rate. So again, if it was $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year, $12,000 of that is subject to taxation at the current rate. Now, if we don't file for another 3 or 4 years, we don't know what that rate is going to be, but we do know approximately what it is today, say 20, 22%. So we know about what our responsibility is going to be. If, however, you're in the latter category, $34,000, $44,000 married filing jointly, then up to 85% of that is subject to taxation. So more than 3/4 of your benefit, unfortunately, your Social Security benefit is going to be subject to taxation. Now, you may ask the question I asked my tax professional every year, what can I do to try and reduce some of my tax liability? Unfortunately, there really isn't much you can do, but some folks have started thinking about the Roth IRA or Roth 401k. I would encourage you to talk to the team before you kind of go down this path, but because Roth isn't right for everybody. But if you do have some money in a Roth IRA, or you maybe have converted some money to a Roth, which is a taxable event, but now you've got some money in a Roth. You're over 59 and a half, you've held it for 5 years, or you've got money in a Roth 401k, again, the same qualifiers. You can take that money out in retirement, and it's not subject to this taxation. It's not includable in this calculation. So again, it's not to say we want to hang up the call and everybody convert all their money to Roth or Roth 401ks, but for the right person in the right situation, and maybe something to at least have a conversation about, I would include your tax professional in the conversation as well to see if it does make sense for me. The one thing I will say is it's not includable as of today. Something may change down the road, so you just need to be aware of that fact. But again, I think it's something you certainly want to go through the process and at least have a conversation. And then more importantly, from an awareness perspective, hopefully some good information answering some of the questions. But really, at the end of the day, what are you actually entitled to? So if we married an individual that qualified for our benefit, or qualifies for a benefit, I should say, we're entitled to one of three benefits: our own individual benefit, a spousal benefit, or if there's a death, a survivor benefit. Now you get one of the three, not all three, not two out of three. It'd be great if we did, right? You'll get one of the three and you'll get whichever is greatest. Meaning if I was entitled to $2,000 a month, but my wife filed and say a spousal benefit and I was able to take maybe $500 a month, well, 500 is lower than 2,000, so nothing would change. If the opposite were true, though, if I was entitled to $500 a month, my wife filed for, say, $2,000, then the spousal benefit, which we'll talk about in a minute, would be higher. It would be about $1,000 a month. I would get an increase. Or if I pass away, and again, I'm getting 2,000, my wife's getting 500, and I pass away, my wife could get a greater death benefit. So again, you get one of three benefits, and you generally get whichever is greatest. So I just wanted to go through a quick example from a spousal perspective. So again, thinking about it from a spousal and then from a deceased or from a death benefit. So we'll look at an example of John and Angela. And for a minute, we're going to assume that John's working and hasn't filed. He's not taking his benefit. But Angela just attained full retirement age, and she filed for her benefit. Did the calculation with Social Security. She's entitled to $900 a month. So she starts taking her benefit. John kind of thinks about this and says, gosh, you know what? 6-7 months later, he's over full retirement age as well. John says, you know what? I think I want to retire as well. John contacts the Social Security Administration. They do the math, and he's entitled to $2,800 a month. Once John files, Angela can contact Social Security and inquire about the spousal benefit. Now, the spousal benefit is up to 50% of the other spouse, or in this case, up to 50% of what John's receiving. So in essence, basically, Angela get an increase from $900 a month to now $1,400 a month, or half of John's. So she gets about a $500 a month increase. Now, I will tell you the two words people never hear is up to. So to get 50%, you both have to be over full retirement age. If John was full retirement age and Angela was, say, 62, and they went through this process, she wouldn't get 50% of John. She'd probably get about 32, 33%. So up to 50% is the max, and that's at full retirement age. A couple of things to note. The reason I left John off the example in the beginning was for Angela to get the spousal benefit, John has to file. If John doesn't file, it's as if John doesn't exist. You can't take 50% of zero, right? So John has to file, and once he does, Angela can file for the spousal benefit. Now, sometimes that makes sense for both people to file, or maybe file a year later. Sometimes it's probably the worst option for them. So that's where you really want to kind of go through. And again, think about that. What income do we need? If $900 is enough, why not just have Angela file and let John's benefit continue to grow behind the scenes? If they say, well, we need a little bit more, then maybe we do have to have John file and then inquire about the spousal benefit. But we're seeing more and more folks that are kind of, to some extent, kind of easing their toe in the water, if you will, for lack of a better term, meaning turning on the lower benefit or having Angela file for that lower benefit and see if that makes sense, if that's enough on a monthly basis. If it isn't, you always have access to John's. But again, I think what we're finding is a lot of folks are running to the Social Security office, literally almost with their hair on fire, saying Social Security is going to end. I want my benefit. I don't, really care. Sometimes they're leaving a lot on the table. So I know emotions, and certainly if it helps you sleep at night, I'm not going to correct you. But I do think you want to take a pause or maybe take a step back and say, does this make sense for me? Certainly if we hear anything changes and it's going to affect us, then we do want to file for our Social Security benefit. So that's the spousal benefit. The survivor benefit's a little different. So instead of 50%, it's 100%. So we'll take the same example. The only difference here is that Angela filed for that $900. It's about 5 years later. John never filed. So John kept working, never filed. Angela, now with a cost of living adjustment, a couple of years in a row. She's up to 1121. What if John passes away 5 years later? He was entitled to 3489 at his death. Now, the good news is Angela now gets 100% of John's benefit, or that 3489, in the form of a death benefit, and she'll get that for the rest of her life. So again, you get that increase. She wouldn't get the 1121. She would get an increase up to that 3489. She gets that for the rest of her life. I will say, and I actually have a neighbor, coincidentally, that kind of went through this process, but where it becomes a real challenge, and obviously death's a challenge, but where it becomes a real challenge is, what if it's my wife and I, or my neighbor in this case, and her husband? They both got the same Social Security benefit. She kind of mentioned it to me, and she lost her husband a year ago. And she said, you know what, prior to his death, he was getting $2,000 a month. I was getting $2,000 a month. As a family, they were getting $4,000. And now she's 84 years of age. Years ago, they downsized, kind of consolidated to one car, really kind of, really did the right things. But the challenge is her expenses, when she lost her spouse, she really got a 50% pay cut, but her expenses only went down by about 20%. Unfortunately, if you lose a spouse, your property tax is still the same, right? They already downsized to one car, so nothing really changed with that. So that certainly becomes a challenge. And I think that's really where you want to kind of go through the process and really kind of do it step by step and say, what makes sense for me today, maybe down the road as well, to have that. So again, thinking about that spousal, and then also thinking about that death benefit, where that comes into play. So a couple of questions to maybe get you thinking about this process. And again, I'm a big fan of sitting down and talking to the team, talking to your tax professional, legal professional as well, to kind of go through what makes the most sense for me, what makes most sense for my spouse. So a couple of questions you may want to ask yourself or kind of discuss with your spouse is, when do you plan on stopping work? Are you going to continue to work in your 60s, 70s, and so on? Or is this something you've already got a hard and fast timeline in place? Do I need this, or is this extra income? Be great if it was, right? Do I need this to live on, or is this a 529 fund, a life insurance fund? We have that opportunity of using that. So we want to kind of go through that process. Unfortunately, we can probably answer the third question. We're probably going to pay taxes on our Social Security benefit, and hopefully no one can answer the last question. I will encourage you, though, don't compare your life expectancy to your parents and grandparents. I think many of us are guilty of that. I'm guilty of it as well. I talk about it quite a bit. Grandparents lived in their 60s, parents lived in their early 80s. And sometimes it's kind of reflective when I think about that. But I think this generation and future generations are going to live a lot longer, a lot healthier, and a lot more active than any prior generation. We're going to kind of change that retirement phase, which loosely translates into we're going to be busier, we're going to be spending a lot more money. So we really need to put more effort into thinking about Social Security and thinking about our other sources of income and really what makes the most sense for us. So again, as we kind of wrap this up, I think timing is an important one. Again, don't be swayed by someone who chose this option or chose that option. Really sit down and think about what's best for you, what's best for your spouse, your family situation. That role of work, are you going to continue to work? Does it make sense to delay? Does it make sense to delay both or one of the benefits? Again, taxes, we talked about it. From an awareness perspective, unfortunately, I don't think this is a one and done conversation. Social Security's been very open and honest, admirably, I think they've been kind of leading the way, saying if something doesn't change between 2037 or 2035, we're going to be paying 75 cents on the dollar or maybe even lower. So I think from an awareness perspective, if we see anything, we hear anything, if it's negative and it affects us, we want to certainly have a conversation. So again, I don't think it's a one and done thing. Stay aware, stay in front of this. As we get closer to our Social Security age, we want to make sure that we have the best options available and have the best information available. So again, if you have any questions, certainly contact Michelle. You see her email there. On behalf of Ralph and I, Ward and Michelle, we can't thank you enough for the opportunity tonight. And if we have some time for questions, we'd be glad to try and address them.
So while we wait for some questions to come in, Mike, I've got a few questions, or I'd like to engage a little bit in conversation. And first thing I'd like to do is say thank you. Let's kind of expand the scope. So Social Security fits within retirement income planning or retirement readiness or cash flow planning or that sort of thing. And a few points that you touched on there is having to do with longevity. So what we have identified is that it turns out on each birth certificate, there is an expiration date. So we encourage our clients to bring their birth certificates in and we check the expiration date. That makes planning a whole lot easier if we know when your expiration date is. So of course, I'm kidding about that. But your point about longevity planning, I read a book a couple of years ago entitled The Upside of Aging. It's actually kind of a collection of essays, but 2 points that they made in the book that just really stuck with me. The first point was that for basically, thousands of years, average life expectancy was 40, and in less than 100 years, it's doubled to over 80. So they basically had this chart that said thousands of years, 40, and then all of a sudden, 80. But they also said with medical technology and even, things that we look at now, like penicillin, or like the, mapping the human genome, or some other things that are more recent, one of the statements that they made was that the first person to live to age 150 has almost certainly already been born. And that sounds crazy to us, but if you go back to 1930s, 1940s, when Social Security was kind of new, and average life expectancy at that point was, mid to late 60s, early 70s, maybe. And now you've got people living out into their 90s and 100 plus kind of thing. They say the fastest growing demographic in the United States is those age 100 and over. So definitely important to be planning for longevity. So all of that being said, I wanted to touch base on a couple of other things you highlighted. So SSA.gov is your website. And in fact, if we join this with, per se, identity theft planning, it's advised or recommended that you go to SSA.gov to claim your profile and basically make sure that you've got that. So when you log in and you put in your information and you set up your username and password, believe it or not, identity thieves are going in and squatting, if you will, on people's profiles at SSA.gov. So it's advised, even if you're not close to retirement at this point, even if you're much younger, that you should go in to SSA.gov and set up your profile to prevent an identity thief, if you will, from going in and setting that up. One of the questions I have for you, Mike, about the Social Security profile. So on your statement, there's no information having to do with whether or not you're married, meaning that your statement is purely based on your own work record. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct. Yeah. Social Security really is individually based. So it's my work record. It's my spouse's work record. I think that's good and bad. I think it gets a little confusing sometimes, but I also think it's cleaner that way because it says, this is my benefit. So it's very clear. Here's what I'm entitled to. Here's what my wife Kim's entitled to. Now we can bridge the gap. We can look at, different options, but I think it's a great starting point. And to your point, I think the fact that, it's so much so that Social Security is concerned about identity theft. They're not sending those statements out anymore, or they're sending them out every 5 years now. I am a big fan of going out, setting up an account, and then having that flexibility. Although their calculator is not the most robust calculator, but at least it gives you a level set. I went out the other day just to get an updated one. It says, okay, now this is what I know as of 2023. So at least I have a good starting point.
Yep. So you right there touched on a number of things that I wanted to bring up or ask about. So first of all, SSA.gov, everybody should go set up their profile regardless of their age or station in life. Your Social Security statement is your work record only. And in fact, on the website, I think it's also your work record only. And I believe, Mike, that they used to have a calculator that they took down because when people were trying to do a break-even analysis to determine, hey, based on a certain assumed rate of return, if you're really kind of wonky and get into this stuff. But what happened was they took it down because it didn't account for spousal. And specifically, if I've got a husband and wife, both age 65, on average, actuarially, one of them will be alive at age 90. So a joint life expectancy is longer than a single life expectancy, and the calculator didn't take that into account, and so they actually took the calculator down off the website.
Yeah, I think it makes it cleaner, and I think you bring up a good point. I hear a lot of folks ask me about the break-even analysis. Is there, a break-even point? And technically there is, late 70s. So if I assume I'm going to die earlier than, say, 78, 79, I'm probably better off taking it 62. My assumption is I'm going to live to 82 or 85. I'm probably better off waiting. The one thing I will just caution you about, though, is make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Meaning, if you're not going to stop working at 62, don't compare $1,300 a month in that example, compare $310. That's going to push off that break-even analysis even farther. So you really do have to think about not what am I grossing, but what am I actually netting? What am I actually taking home? And once you really look at that, and if it's, you're 62, but you're going to retire sometime this year, then I think you're okay with that analysis. But gosh, if I'm 60, I plan on working until 67, hopefully, if not 70. So I've got to really look at what that net number is if I file early, because again, that'll push that off a little bit. And I think that's part of the challenge with the calculator. It doesn't really take into account a lot of those things.
Yeah. So a couple of rules of thumb, if you will. I'm going to float them by you, and you tell me thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of rules of thumb. But so if we just assume, for simplicity and illustration's sake, that everybody's full retirement age, FRA, is age 67. So let's just use that as an assumption to begin with. If you are working prior to age 67 and making more than, right now, the threshold's 21,000 and change, as a general rule, if you are working prior to age 67, generally would say don't file for Social Security.
Yeah, I mean, I don't say yes or no, but I'd lean towards the thumbs up. How's that?
Okay, fair enough. Right, you don't give actually advice.
But again, everybody's different, and that doesn't mean that like my wife Kim, she hasn't worked outside the home for 30 years. We're probably going to look at hers right at 62, and why not, right? I mean, a couple of $100 extra. She's not working, so her benefit's not reduced. It might push me into a higher tax bracket, so I may not want to do it, but it's not going to negatively affect me. So,
yep. So I would say, so to the extent that Mike can't say it, as a financial advisor, I can say it, I will say it. Generally speaking, if you're working and making more than $21,000 threshold prior to your age 67, I would say generally don't per se apply. And then to the extent that, especially when there's a spouse involved, but the larger of the two benefits, so basically age 67, for every year early you retire, you lose 6% of your benefits. So if you're retiring 5 years early, or not retiring, excuse me, let me also distinguish. This is about when you claim the benefit. So if your full retirement age is 67 and you claim your benefit at 62, that's a 5-year early, 6% per year. That's a 30% permanent reduction in your benefit. And if you're working, they also withhold $1 for every $2 you make over the threshold. So generally speaking, would rather not file early. And then to your point, age 67, for every year you delay, you get a permanent 8% increase in your benefit. So if you wait until 70, you're literally collecting 24% more than if you had collected at full retirement. So especially when you've got a spousal situation, the larger of the two benefits, we want to, generally speaking, we want to delay that till age 70, because that benefit is increased by 24%, and that benefit is now payable for the life of the surviving spouse. So when the first spouse passes away, you drop the smaller of the two benefits, but the larger of the two benefits continues. So we want to maximize that larger of the two benefits. So if we can, we want to have the spouse with the larger benefit defer until age 70, general rule of thumb. So
yeah, no, I agree. And I always,
put that up.
I do talk to folks because I kind of scratch my head. If you think of that example I shared, instead of getting $1,300 a month, you're only getting $310. But the kicker and additional is you're still starting at $1,300. You're still starting at 70 cents on the dollar. So it's almost adding insult to injury. not only am I not getting a lower amount, the 70 cents, but I'm even getting a further lower amount. And in fact, you may not even get a check. If you're earning 60, 70, $80,000 a year, you're not going to get a check. So you kind of scratch your head and say, why would I file if I'm going to get locked into a lower amount for the rest of my life, which may be 30 or 40 years? And by the way, I don't even get a check. But again, everybody's different, and everybody's individual, but it's a tough one.
Our perspective is if you are, 62, 63, 64, whatever, the economy is good, unemployment is low, you're relatively young and healthy, you can do more for yourself working than, per se, stopping work and claiming benefits. One kind of caveat or asterisk, if you will, on this, I want to throw out there is health history. And that's something that we didn't really talk about in your presentation, but generally speaking, if people have a health condition, a chronic health condition, or something which is going to adversely impact their life expectancy, that would be an asterisk, that would be an exception. We would generally take a look at, having, if there's per se, a spousal situation, and one of the spouses has a health history, we would take a look at claiming those smaller benefits sooner, getting that started, because again, when that first spouse passes away, that smaller benefit goes away, so start that sooner rather than waiting. But still, the larger benefit, if I can delay that as long as possible, that's going to be payable for the life of the surviving spouse. I want to continue to delay that as much as possible.
Right. We have best laid plans, right? And my goal is to, again, have my wife start at 62, me wait till 70, but we know life gets in the way and things may change. And I think that's one of the great parts too about delaying is that I have access to it if something changes. I mean, to give you an example, I've got in-laws that are 82 years of age. I remember 20 years ago having a conversation with them, pleading with them not to take their Social Security benefit. But instead of being someone who talks about Social Security, I was their son-in-law, right? So kind of meathead. So they didn't listen to me. And now their number two complaint, the number one complaint is still me, but their number two complaint at 82 years of age is how low their Social Security benefit is. And I'm thinking, gosh, I wish somebody had told you 20 years ago, right? So I think having access to that and delaying that, I think the challenge is sometimes you start taking that money in at 62, 64, and you get used to living on that. And there isn't that extra money out there. I think if we can delay it, I just think it puts you in a better position. But again, everybody's different.
So what is the number one age? What's the most popular age? At what age do the most people claim Social Security?
I don't know for a fact from Social Security, but if I had to guess, I think it's 65. And the reason it's 65
I think it's actually 62.
It could be, but I think one of the big drivers for 65 is if I don't file at 65, I get a bill in the mail from Medicare. So at 65, you just don't want another bill. I do think you're right. I think we're seeing more and more people, again, running to the office, kind of just run on the bank saying, I don't care, 70 cents on a dollar, it's fine. Yeah. I'm afraid the program's going away. There's no merit to say just because you took it at 62, changes down the road aren't going to affect me. There really is no case study of that. So, and if it helps you sleep at night, that's great. But I'm very fearful that a lot of folks are letting emotion run kind of run wild as opposed to what's the best strategy.
So how about a fun fact, and you could speak to this, or maybe in your conversations with your in-laws, they would tell you back in the day, but was Social Security always subject to income tax?
That's a good question. I don't know if it always was. I know over the past X number of years it's been subject to that, but I haven't taken a look back then. I do think it's interesting, though, when you think about, I talked about sources of income 20, 30, 40 years ago, to max out on Social Security was $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. I know we made less back then, but the caps were so much smaller than 166,000 next year. The caps are just grown dramatically. So I think that's probably one of the bigger surprises that I've seen. The other one too, and I know it just popped up, so I think, we want to make sure we caution folks, is the cost of living adjustment next year is projected to be 3.2. One, it's a lot less than it is currently, but then two, cost of living adjustments are not a guarantee. Cost of living adjustment started in 1975. We've seen years where we've had zero cost of living adjustment. And if you look at it from 75 to 2022, the average cost of living adjustment was about 3.7. So it's really not that far off. I know it's not good news for a lot of folks because it is lower. But one, it's good that we get a cost of living adjustment. But, again, that's where I think, to me, what keeps me up, I get a lot of people ask me, does Social Security keep you up at night? And quite honestly, the joke is, right, I sleep like a baby. I get every 2 hours screaming or whatever. I sleep well when I think about Social Security because one of the few things in my life I have zero control over. I run a calculation. It tells me how much I'm entitled to. What keeps me up at night is my personal savings. Am I doing everything I can? Am I looking at the Roth? Am I looking at IRAs, catch-up provisions on 401ks? That's what keeps me up at night because that's the portion I control. That's the part I really want to focus my attention on.
Yeah. Well, I can answer the question. Social Security was not always subject to income tax, and those of us who are a bit younger aren't aware of that, and so we're not making a big hubbub. But let me tell you, when they began to subject Social Security to income tax, those people were absolutely irate that, this Social Security, I paid tax into the system in order to get this income stream, which came out tax-free, and then they changed the rules and subject Social Security income tax. So that was a pretty crazy thing.
Yeah, I mean, not to nerd you out, but you think about income tax as a whole, right? I mean, initially it was put in place to pay for the Civil War. It was supposed to be a temporary type of thing, but obviously somebody got wind of, hey, this is a pretty good idea. And sadly, we continue to pay.
I just looked it up, Ward. It looks like the taxation of Social Security began in 1984.
Wow. How do you like that? Wasn't that long ago.
No.
But
no.
Yeah, it's kind of like when they changed the full retirement age from 65 to 67. They did it, whenever they did it, maybe that was 1984 also, but they basically said for those people born after 1960, which in 1984, we were 24 years old, kind of thing. So yeah, they basically hit the younger people. One final point that I just want to make as we wrap up on the question of will Social Security be there, will it pay claims or whatever else. Mike, you alluded to this just a moment ago. I would say to you that I have a pretty high degree of confidence that number one, Social Security will be there, and number two, it will pay benefits that are currently projected or expected. And the reason that I say that is that there are so many things that can be done to, quote, fix the current shortfall. Some of those things would be to increase the current rate of taxation from the current 7.65% to both employer and employee. Probably won't do that, but very likely will, as you mentioned. So up to a certain amount of income, which I think you just said is maybe around $150,000, $160,000, we only pay that Social Security tax up to that cap. They could raise or even eliminate the cap, and that by itself would fix the problem. Now, that would effectively be a tax increase, but it would only, quote, tax the rich, and of course, everybody's in favor of that. So that is one lever that they could pull that would literally fix the shortfall single-handedly, is just increasing or eliminating the cap on which Social Security wage taxes are paid. So I think it's very likely that Social Security will be here and that it will pay the benefits that are currently expected and projected. So I just put that out there. Mike, any closing comments?
No, we agree. It's just what it looks like. And I think to your point, take that a step further and say, take away the cap, but then cap the benefit. So regardless of who it is, you only get $2,000 a month or $1,000. So again, they could say Social Security is not going away and you only get $800 a month. I'm just making up numbers, right? It's not good news, but they could say, okay, Social Security is still here. So there are a lot of things they have available to them. It's just hopefully at some point we do need our elected leaders to kind of cross the aisle, so to speak, and say, let's take this program. I think we'll probably see drips and drabs. We'll see. Yeah, I do think we'll probably see some changes. I think full retirement age may go up to 70, 72, 73, like requirement of distributions. It's probably not a stretch. So there are things available. It's just really what's going to happen and then how are we best positioned to take advantage of this.
Well, I believe it was Winston Churchill who said, you can count on Americans to do the right thing at the last possible moment. So that's probably what we're looking at in terms of changes to Social Security. Well, Ralph and Mike, we really appreciate your time, your presentation, being with us today, spending some time educating us on Social Security. For those who are listening, whether live or on the replay that we will be posting to our website, if you have questions about Social Security and specifically Social Security claiming strategies and how they apply to your specific situation, please give us a call here at Covenant Wealth Strategies. We'd be more than happy to speak with you about this topic. So until next time, God bless.